So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for picking up Jane Austen's Quill with author Rose Servitova, who is joining us from Ireland today. So welcome, Rose. Rose and I met back in 2018. We met her at the Jane Austen Festival in Bath, where she was promoting her first book, the Longborn Letters, which I have right here. And she and I actually sat on a same bus right next to each other on a bus trip to Lyme Regis. So we got to go to a nice seaside town, although it was a very rainy day, Rose.
Very.
I'm pretty sure I was soaked through by the time we were driving back.
Yeah, it was mental. Yeah, it was. But anyway, worth it.
Yeah. So we're going to kind of run this as an interview style today. If you guys have any questions, we'll kind of be popping occasionally and checking the chat just to see if any of you guys want to jump in at some point. But we've got a set of questions. But Rose, why don't you just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. My name is Rose Servitova. I'm 46 years of age, and approximately when I was 40 years of age, I had two very young children, and it's around that time I started writing. Well, we can probably end up speaking about that at some stage, but people had often said to me, oh, you have a book in you, because I love words and I love writing and all that. And but I never thought I had a book in me. I couldn't think, well, how can I write a book if I don't know what it's about? But at the back of my mind all the time was the fact that I loved Jane Austen, and was the fact that I kind of had said to myself at some point, Mr. Collins, I would love to write his diary or something like that. I was just really in love with him as a character. I just thought, what a brilliant character. And so basically what happened was it was nearly 2017, and it was about May 2016. And I said, I better get cracking on this because, I had organized a festival for the bicentenary as well. And that's when I began. So that's really my kind of background with regards to Jane Austen, how that began, and a bit about my writing. But I'm married to a man from the Czech Republic. We have two children, Laura 10 and Charlie 8. And just living in Ireland, we have a fluffy cat, and just being normal, I suppose. I work part-time now. I used to work full-time, but I'm trying to devote a bit more time to writing. So I'm working part-time now with people with special needs. But I do. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you, Rose. So we're just going to jump right in. So what was the first book that you read as a child that had a lasting impression on you?
Okay. Well, actually, just bear with me now 1 second. I might have it here.
That's wonderful. I love your bookshelves behind you, by the way. I've been checking them out.
Well, no, this isn't it. But I think I have it downstairs, but I'll give you an example that my granny used to read to us. She lived in Sligo, which was, the other side of the country. And we used to go up there as kids when we were for the summer. So she used to read us. She brought back books from America. This is like The Children That Lived in a Shoe. And this is very typical of these kind of nursery rhymes and things that she had. This is one of the original ones. Like there isn't a date on it now. It's probably published in the 30s or 40s. So recently, the one The Night Before Christmas, it's a very special edition. And I purchased it on eBay because it was, a first edition. It was exactly like the copy my granny had read to us as children. So it was just absolutely magical, and I was so excited when I got it. And then my aunt, now all the books that had been in the house were destroyed, but my aunt actually, only a couple of weeks ago, had said to me, oh, I had rescued that book and you can have it. So now I have, one I bought on eBay, which was, in remembrance of it. And I have the original one my granny read. So she brought back books in the 30s and 40s from America when she was a nanny over there. And she had to wait till the war ended before she could marry my granddad. He was building the house while he was waiting for her. And when he came back, she had a trunk with some books in it. And, Wuthering Heights and Jane Austen and all those were in it. So that was the one, I suppose, the way my granny used to sit on the bed and read those nursery rhymes to us, Old Mother Hubbard, Oh, How I Like to Go Up in a Swing, all those kind of very innocent ones. So those are my nice memories.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. And then when did you first discover that you wanted to be a writer? Was it while you were young as well, or?
Well, do you know what? I did probably. And I was one of 7 children, and I tended to like spending time on my own quite a bit as a child, and I liked reading as a child, but we never had books in my house. We we were quite poor, and my parents were, I mean, I'm from a working class background. Books just didn't feature. And it's not like now where books are so readily available and you can order books at the library online. We weren't near a library, you know, that sort of thing. So like I said, my granny was always bought us books for Christmas or birthday presents and that. So, so I think as a child, I did love it, but it seemed too big a wish. And I think a lot of people hold back writing because it feels too big a thing to become a writer, or it's almost like, who do you think you are to be a writer? Or to say, like, it even sounds arrogant to say, oh, I'm going to be a writer. It's just this, it's like saying, I'm going to be an actor, or I'm going to be whatever. There has to be a certain kind of confidence, I suppose, behind it. And plus you have to prove, you know, you can't just stay writing for 20 years and never put something out there. You kind of have to be brave and you know, you're very vulnerable, and get some slack in that as well. So you have to kind of have a tough skin. So yeah, I think I always did want to write, but I never did. And so like many people who want, they go into a different line of work. So I went and worked in libraries. I worked in bookshops. I dated creative people. I was going out with films, you know, a guy for 7 years, and he was like a film student. My husband is an artist, this sort of thing. So it was always about being around creative people, but just not having the gumption probably to write myself. And as I say, something happened just after I had my kids, and I was feeling down, and I went somewhere to just clear my head one night. And I'd never gone to a literary event before, and there was a well-known famous Irish writer giving a talk that evening, and it felt like I found my tribe. I sat in the audience and I just felt like I had arrived on my planet. There's something so good about it that I felt, you know, I have to try this. I have to write something, a short story, something, just do it, you know.
Well, thank goodness you did, because you have 2 amazing novels, and I cannot wait for the rest to come out, and I will definitely be following you throughout your career. So I'm glad you got the confidence and the gumption to do it. So what do you like to do when you're not writing? Obviously, you said you work part-time with special needs. Do you have a family and pets?
Yeah. Yes. The pet now, I don't put much time into, I have to say. He looks after himself. He's
a cat.
Now, I have to say, I'm secretly a dog person, but I'm very attached to this cat. And, you know, they love themselves. And we have a lot to learn from animals in general, cats, dogs. There's just so much, you know, unconditional love for others, but also for themselves. It's just a sense of, you know, I'm here, you know, whether it's a dog, they're just joyful. And our cat is just always looking after herself. So there's no fear of her at all. But I like going for walks. I've always felt that my head is better when I come back from a walk than, you know, no matter what's going on. And I think a lot of writers, and maybe a lot of people here in the audience as well, are empaths, are sensitive people, are, you know, we get kind of bait around a lot by life, and we have to kind of let things go. Life is, you know, we care an awful lot about the people in our lives, the relationships in our lives. So, you know, you can get very overwhelmed easily enough. And I think writers as well are quite a sensitive bunch and feel other people's stuff, you know. And sometimes when you're writing, you have to kind of go there because you have to reach the emotions that you're kind of trying to write about as well. But I find, and I found for many years, that going out in nature, for me, it's a walk. I live in the countryside, going out for a walk and just clearing my head. And I do walk with a friend, but I actually love my own company. So I don't find I'm on my own often enough. So I actually enjoy getting just a walk on my own for half an hour, that kind of way. That's just the best medicine. Yeah.
So you're a bit of a Lizzie Bennet then. There's part of her in you.
My dresses, if I wore them, are, you know, 6 inch deep in mud. But yeah, I am. I actually am. Do you know, I love an old muddy puddle and jumping over ditches and gates and that. I think my jumping over ditches and gates days are behind now. I have lower back pain sometimes, but yeah, I do. And I think it's something, when we'll probably be talking a bit about Jane Austen as well, it's just, you know, you just can't relate to her work unless there's a bit of Jane Austen in you, a little bit of Lizzie Bennet or Anne Elliot or something, you know. It's just, you know, we do. And I love watching those, even the period dramas, because I love looking at how they're sitting down at the table, and I love looking at the wallpaper, and I love them being out in nature, watching the hills and at the Peak District and all that sort of thing. I think everyone does, you know. I think we're secret. She is very clever getting us. That's why I think her tribe get her, like, you know.
Yeah. Do you think of a lot of your ideas when you're out writing or walking? Sorry.
Yes. Probably not. I'm probably not using it for that purpose at the moment, but certainly almost the entire Longborn Letters was written on foot while I was just looking over ditches and laughing away to myself. I would go out, because the funny thing is, it's obviously, like, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a book of letters, an epistolary novel. And so when Mr. Bennet writes, or when Mr. Collins writes, tell he doesn't want to write, he's so reluctant, and it's about the banter and then the silliness and maybe how he's poking fun at Mr. Collins, but Mr. Collins doesn't see it, and you see that in his reply. So anytime I wrote something with one letter and I was kind of walking down the road and just myself, but the retort or the answer would come at the same time. So nearly one letter was written and the next one was written almost instantaneously, and the two of them, it was just very, it was outside walking that book was written. Less so maybe the Watsons, a little bit of, but definitely I think I need to go back to it, to be honest. I think I'm not spending enough time out walking. Full of ideas then.
Now, we did have a question pop up in the chat asking, how many hours a day do you spend writing?
You're going to kill me, guys. Zero for the longest time. But I've just come back from 3 nights at a writer's retreat nearby. Now, it's not a retreat that had lots of other people in workshops. I also do those as well, kind of like one-day workshops here and that. But when my kids are so young and the lockdowns and all that, I wasn't getting away for those kind of retreats and that. And I have to say, I only started part-time working, let's say at the beginning of the year. So I've only a few months under my belt of that. And it's only when that every second Wednesday I was off, and every, geez, I hope my internet is okay. It says there it can be unstable at times. Hopefully it'll stay connected. But that's, every Thursday and Friday for a few hours when my kids are at school. So I'm more blocky like that. And what I'm trying to do to have a bit of discipline is on the Mondays and Tuesdays, when I'm at work, I do come home exhausted. I'll be honest, it's a very difficult job. And especially I was redeployed during COVID to the front line as well. And I've only literally a few weeks back from that. So it was really exhausting coming home in the evening, then trying to get the dinner on the showers and the kids and school lunches and all that. In the evening then is that if I'm too tired, if I have a migraine or something, I'll just either read something maybe for a bit of research or listen to something. I've started doing a little bit of audio books now because I just find it allows me to do it when I'm traveling as well. And now I have to visit my mother every second Wednesday. So now one day has disappeared. So now that's what I'm saying. I'm kind of under a bit of pressure with the Thursdays and Fridays. And that's why occasionally I book a few nights away. So that's doing, unfortunately, I'm not one of those people who writes every day. I'd love to, but I need to work right now as well. But
life gets in the way always. So all right, so we've got lots of questions coming in, but some of them are already embedded within our interview. So I'm gonna move along for a minute. So I'm not ignoring you guys in the chat. So what is your relationship with Jane Austen? How did you learn about her? How did you fall in love with her writing?
Well, it's just the grandmother I actually mentioned, in Sligo, who to be quite honest with you, the childhood I had at home, I was the second eldest of 7 children. My eldest sister was very sick. My parents, it was a difficult childhood. 1980s, Ireland, I'm not sure how you were in the US, difficult times, especially working class. It was very much a struggle, and we were isolated. We didn't have any family around. So the family in Sligo going there in the summer just seemed so carefree, and there was books there, and there was cousins there, and there was jumping and running around, following sheep and going up into the forestry, up into the hills. It was just amazing. It was a bit like Heidi. I know that sounds a bit idealistic, but it was a little bit like Heidi growing up. And Heidi was one of the books. I probably have it back there. I did rescue 1 or 2 of my granny's books, so there are a few back there. So that was it. Jane Austen I met on the shelves of my granny's. And it's funny, I evolved. So I went from, let's say, Enid Blyton and those nursery rhymes onto, let's say, Enid Blyton, kind of the Claudine at St. Clair's and the boarding school ones. Then I went on, because you can tell I'm getting into the teenage years now, the early teenage years, Anne of Green Gables, feeling very like Anne of Green Gables, feeling a bit like an outsider in that, freckles and just red every time someone spoke to me, and, all that sort of thing, and starting to like boys. And of Green Gables, then on to really Jane Austen, the Brontes, Little Women, all that sort of stuff. So that's where I encountered Jane Austen, and I definitely Pride and Prejudice, and I did really love Mr. Darcy. And I mean, my granny had this, what they called the good room, tiny little room. There was nothing really good about it, but in fairness to my granny, it was like you kept the kids out of it. It was kind of the room if you had visitors. So it was a small wee room, but she had brought back lovely kind of crockery from the US and things like that. But in there was where the books were kept. And there was a little chaise longue in there when we didn't know what one was. It looked like a unfinished settee or couch, as we call them. But I was like, oh, that's a chaise longue. But I would lie across that reading my Pride and Prejudice, waiting for Mr. Darcy to pass the window out where just kind of and say, you know, put me out of my misery now, Rose, I'm in love with you. Come with me, Kimberly, and we shall start it here. And it didn't happen, like, you know, but naturally. But funnily enough, I do say this, I think, in the introduction at some point, that as the years rocked on, and I think we all have this, where we love different Austen books at different stages of our lives more, or they're more relevant to us. God, we've all related to Anne Elliot, or, if you feel rejected, you could feel a bit like Fanny from Mansfield Park, and just even the adaptations, they're just amazing. So every time ones were coming out, you were kind of, you saw them anew, maybe characters interpreted them differently. And of course, Love and Friendship was great as well. So, but Mr. Collins and the minor characters, and we can talk about that in a while too, but the minor characters started coming to the fore for me. I think maybe I was in good relationships at the time, and I was less looking around for Mr. Darcy. Maybe I felt I'd found him. And all of a sudden it was like the minor characters started stepping forward. So yeah, that was it. So that's my relationship with Austen. I just love her. I sense her sometimes. I think we all do. And like someone said at a talk I was at, we all think, she's our best friend, And I'm sure everyone here, if you had one of these, if you could have anyone alive or dead at the dinner table, who would you have? And I'm sure we'd all have the Mahatma Gandhis and the Marilyn Monroes, but we would definitely have the Jane Austens, so.
Yeah, fantastic. So was Pride and Prejudice the first Austen novel you read, or did you read something else first?
Would have, but I have funny feeling it was Pride and Prejudice. I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah.
And it's the one that over the years, by God, not so much now, but your 20s, your turbulent 20s, even into your 30s. So, with the, what would you call it? The drama of life, returning to a book because it's just comforting. Yeah. Because it is your comfort blanket. I see my kids have their what they call their nyanyas, or their baby cow. My daughter has, she's 10, and he goes up and down the stairs. He's everywhere with her, and my son the same. And that was Pride and Prejudice was my nyanya for years. Yeah, and still is. Like, I enjoy picking up just a random page every now and again.
Yeah. So I love this question. Do you have any Jane Austen hot takes or unpopular opinions that you hold, likes, dislikes, anything like that?
No, not really. Do you know, it's a great question. Have you any, Emily, that you'd like to share with me? Because I don't really know if I have. I just think making a hero-esque out of Mr. Collins was controversial enough. I certainly met with a lot of gasps and very interesting comments, let's say when there were reviews on Amazon, how much people hated him and how much they dreaded reading the book. They were my favorite reviews. I approached this book with trepidation. This is the kind of things I was getting. Mr. Collins makes me sick. How am I going to, there was all this. And I have to say, even a well-known kind of, how would you call him, an art critic in Ireland, he was at one of my talks, and he said, Mr. Collins, you made him human, you made him a father, and you made him this. And I just love, the theme for me was male friendship and its evolution over time. And it's an interesting subject for me, and men are hugely important in my life. And this relationship in how will I put it? In a genre that can be sometimes dismissed as just being very female and very about the women's relationships and the women and the love and all that. And I just felt so strongly about Mr. Collins and Mr. Bennet, and how they both were lacking something, and how maybe through divine intervention or something, they would just knock about through life together. We all have that horrible uncle or that cousin that we avoid at weddings, but we're tied through blood. So sometimes there's no avoiding it. And how do you make the most of it? And how can you how can you change and how can you respect someone over time, even, like, you know. And I think people felt it was impossible to do, but I didn't shy away from it. And Mr. Collins and Mr. Bennett, like Mr. Bennett, it wasn't like, oh, he embraced letter writing straight away. We all know from Pride and Prejudice, he was very bad at writing letters. Elizabeth and those, they give out about how poor he is at communication, but through constant persistence and annoying and just trying to keep him at bay, he has to. And then there's huge gaps. And then, you know, so it kind of happens over time. And then in Pride and Prejudice, you know, we have Mr. Bennett saying to Elizabeth in Pride and Prejudice, he says, I would not give up his correspondence for anything. And we realised that he's so entertained by the letters he receives from Mr. Collins that he's actually grown to like them, you know. So that's the only take. I don't have anything else. Now, Emily, give me a hot take. I don't know if I know really what hot takes are, you know. Well, I was like, I had to Google it actually when you said it. I was like, what's a hot take? Oh my God.
Unpopular opinion. I think that Northanger Abbey is the best Jane Austen book. That's my hot take. Most people do not agree with me on that.
Oh, I don't agree with you either, so that's definitely a hot take. There you go, Emily. Well done.
I'll throw it out there. Mr. Tilney is my favorite, but I also just absolutely love that book. Like, I love all of them, don't get me wrong, but I actually think Northanger Abbey is the best. So, you know, so that's my hot take. There's a lot of chats coming in about responding to that. Sorry if I just made everybody angry.
We might have to have another call. We might have to have a chat with you later on another Zoom call. Knock it out here. But look, it's not bad. It's not the worst, actually. So I do agree. And actually, I think how they're portrayed and how period dramas, like, I know this is another controversial one. Actually, this might be a hot take coming your way. I loved the recent Emma 2020, and I know a lot of people hated it. So I'm just saying, I thought it brilliant. No need for the nosebleed. It was unnecessary. But outside that, I actually really fond, and I really saw that, you know, her work can be interpreted, and you think there's nothing new and original. And when they said Emma comedy, I was like, what? Like, oh yeah, there's a few funny bits, but actually it was done really well. So that's my thing. So yeah. Enjoy being with you there. Well done, Joy.
I actually agree with you. I pretty much love almost every adaptation because it's an adaptation, and I just take it. Some are better than others, but I, you know, take what I can get. So, all right. Do you have a favorite Jane Austen novel? And I'm sure it probably changes through the years, but ask you right now.
Have I Jane Austen favorite? Do you know, it's, I suppose Pride and Prejudice was it, and Persuasion snuck up over the years and overtook it. I think that's more a sign of maybe myself and where I'm at, and you know, there is something there. Bath, I really connected. I felt Persuasion in me bones as I walked around and saw all the different streets and that. So that's where I'd say Persuasion is probably just narrowly ahead. And Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte was up there neck and neck with Pride and Prejudice for a long time. So kind of depends.
Yeah.
And what is it? The Blue Castle by L.M. Montgomery. Anyone who wants an amazing book, please get it. Oh my God. A Jane Austen fan recommended it to me. And my life, it was like, where has this book been all my life? Now, I know maybe not everyone feels the same way, but it's outstanding, I think. And if it had that effect on me, I know people who've gone and read it since and loved it as well. So, yeah. The Blue Castle, L.M. Montgomery. Okay.
And then do you have any favorite Jane Austen heroes, heroines, minor characters? We know you have a love for Mr. Collins.
Yeah.
But any others stand out to you?
All the weird ones. Mr. Pam. Oh, sure, he's brilliant. You know, absolutely brilliant. And someone mentioned there, I just saw the things that actually I'm enjoying, and we can talk about newsletters and stuff later on, but in the newsletter I send out supposedly every month, but it's usually either every month or every 6 weeks, that a minor character is asked to contribute. Or it might be a major character too. A minor character could be Miss Bingley, it could be Mr. Palmer. Do you know? And you really get the full force of their personality. So I like giving them a kind of a voice. But yeah, the main characters get it too. Mr. Palmer, I really liked. Someone mentioned there Harriet Smith in the Emma 2020 was amazingly portrayed. So I do think that can affect my opinion, because Hugh Laurie played Mr. Palmer just amazingly well, and you know, he totally nailed it. But yeah, Sir John Middleton. Is it Middleton? Sir
Yes.
John. Yeah. Oh yeah. Again, with sense of sensibility, when he's walking up to the cottage with Mrs. Jennings and the dogs, I just think they're wonderful. I love them. Yeah. So I like. like all that, yeah.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get into your newsletters later. And for those of you who have not subscribed to them, they are so entertaining. Please do. All right, so let's jump into Longborn Letters, the correspondence between Mr. Collins and Mr. Bennet. So what inspired you to write this novel? And of course, it's the epistolary novel.
Yeah, I just, like, literally, I had the idea for the diary. Now you sit down, Emily, and try and write Mr. Collins's diary. I can tell you, it ain't going nowhere. It is just, I had hardly sat down and wrote a few pages. I said, this is just the worst thing I've ever come across. Who will read this? It's horrendous. Plus he's so dumb as well, like that it's just full of arrogance and it's really hideous. So that's really what happened. I was a few pages into it and I said, this is not going to work. And I don't know, I know it was just literally a day or two in that it sprung on me that what Mr. Collins needed was his opposite, someone who was witty, someone who would see through his dribble. And I just realized, and it just kind of dawned on me, and maybe because I had been reading Pride and Prejudice around the time, that, well, there was, you know, about 4 or 5 letters in Pride and Prejudice between those two men. They're referred to. There's the first one where he's offering the olive branch, and then there's one later on he's warning them to, you know, that Mr. Elizabeth, Mr. Darcy or whatever. And then there's one where Mr. Bennet is looking for congratulations. And then there's, you know, there's over and back a bit communication between the two of them. And he's arriving on to Lucas Lodge regularly. And I just said, you know what, I'll fill in those letters that are in Pride and Prejudice, and I'll just take it over the next few years onto its natural conclusion or whatever. So that's what I did, and just see how they developed. And it was just so easy because, like I say, Mr. Bennet over time began to appreciate the correspondence and even, dare I say, the friendship in a really poking fun kind of way. And he gets Mr. Collins into trouble a few times. And Mr. Collins kind of, you know, this idea of people wanting to listen to his sermons and stuff, it's very, you know, it is arrogant in that. And it's kind of very in keeping with him. He's never fabulous, you know, he's never gorgeous, but he does appreciate. And actually, Charlotte appreciates him a bit. And we know that she's going to make the best of what she's got. And certainly we know in Pride and Prejudice she's expecting. So we know they have children together. And just, you know, how would she make the best of this? We all have to sometimes in our marriages, you know, do it for the kids. Just keep going or whatever. Get over the argument or whatever. So it's, yeah, it was kind of an interesting journey. So that was the inspiration, but the speed at which it was written. 2 things. Number one, I had the idea of doing a Georgian festival in the town I'm from. Now, where I'm from is Limerick, and it's in Ireland, in southwest. It has the largest Georgian quarter outside Dublin. So Dublin was the second city, supposedly, of the British Empire when it was ruling Ireland. It was like a lot of things happened in Dublin and just beautiful architecture there. But Limerick had the biggest Georgian quarter outside of Dublin. And Tom Lefroy was born on the main street in Limerick. Tom Lefroy, who was the supposed love of Jane Austen's life, or certainly someone who picked her interest. And he was, like, I've met his descendants, his family. They've given a talk at one of the Georgian events we organised, and, you know, we did other things as well. But the thing was, that was coming at lightning speed around the corner, 2017, and I was determined to have this book written. But just to say, and for anyone who feels they want a refund, the Longborn Letters is an awful lot shorter than you realise. People often say, how did you write a novel? Because it isn't a novel, it's more a novella, you know. And just someone, she said to me, don't call it a novella, even if it is shorter than a novel. Just, you know, it actually is still almost 200 pages, let's say, when it's actually, I have it here. It looks like a novel, but the reality, 185 or 200 pages. And the reality is, it's actually very short. It's less than 40,000 words. Most people could write that in a really short time. So I had to get it out very fast. That was really what that was about, Emily.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely wonderful. I think my favorite scene, and I won't give too much away for those of you who haven't read it, is when Mr. Bennet gets Mr. Collins rather drunk. Yeah. And the shenanigans that ensue. It's actually, I think it happens a couple times now that I think about it. I think there might be 2.
There might be a glass of port and a bit of brandy consumed there. But yeah, I might read one of those bits, not that particular one, but from one of those extracts, you know, if we have time later. page or something.
Wonderful. So we've got a couple of questions in the chat about Longborn Letters. So I'm just going to pull it up real quick and be able to go through them. So the first one was it more difficult to write an epistolary, a story in letters, than writing out, the traditional narration?
Yeah. So the answer to that is I didn't realize that, for two things. Well, basically, the night I launched the book in Limerick, now I had a couple of launches, a well-known writer was at it, because he's a local writer and he supports new writers, but he's also a Booker long-listed nominee, and he's won the Guardian Book Award and all these sort of things. He's lovely and he supports local writing. So he showed up, and that night he said to me, oh, the epistolary novel is the hardest novel to write. And that's why, and he named a particular writer, had given it up halfway through because it just doesn't work and you can't get across the points you want, and fair play to you. And I said, if I had known that, I would not have even started it. I never would have gone near it with a barge pole if I had known it was going to be difficult, because it wasn't for me. So I'm glad I didn't know that. But there was a good reason why it was abandoned in the 1790s, and why Jane Austen herself had started books out with epistolaries. It was very fashionable at the time, and actually the kind of the modern structure of the novel with the narrative, first person, third person, all that came about, and her books are the better part. But for this, it worked. I think it might be the only book in the whole planet that it would work for, is because it's so easy to read between the lines with these two particular gentlemen. Very easy to slap on a PS, postscript at the end, and kind of just get that extra dig in, or some information we need to know for later on can get in there. So I actually found it very easy, but I don't think I'd ever tackle it again with anything else, because I do love first person narratives. Do love that. But the letter, probably no, that was it. Done and dusted. Yeah.
Yeah. Some more questions from Sigmund. Mr. Bennet and Mr. Collins are cousins, are they not? Yes. And do they discuss other family relations in your book?
A little bit. There's a visit here and there to the Gardners, and no, but I didn't really introduce, and it's something I try not to do, actually. I do. It's the same with the Watsons. There was one particular character I had to create in the Watsons, but actually the name was mentioned in Jane Austen's fragment, and we're already there in the background. So I just brought one particular character to the foreground. I actually feel that Austen has sufficient with what she has, that there was no point. If I needed to now, I would have, had them visiting mutual cousins up in Nottingham, or, but I just think I would have tripped myself up if I started bringing in new characters. There was plenty there, plenty of mutual acquaintances. Someone like, Mr. Collins loves all this, I'll go over and introduce myself to Mr. Darcy because, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, his aunt, is my patron. This kind of constant, and, there is a bit of, what's his name? Lucas Lodge, what's that gentleman's name? Sir William Lucas, just all this kind of respectability and being in with this crowd and being in with that crowd, but all quite innocent underneath it all, but being related to someone was brilliant. And actually, Mr. Bennet pokes fun at Mr. Collins in one of the letters. You must be delighted, for now that Elizabeth and Darcy are married, you're practically a nephew-in-law to, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who we know would be horrified with the connection. But, Mr. Bennet can't help but poke fun there. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. All right. I don't see any new questions about Longborn Letters. So can we talk a little bit about the Watsons, which of course is an unfinished fragment. It's not widely as read as some of others of Jane Austen's novels. So why were you attracted to it? What drew you to trying to tackle the completing of a Jane Austen fragment?
Brilliant question. I'm trying to remember, was it that time in 2018? No, I think it was when I was in 2017. I went to Bath twice. So I went in 2017 and I went in 2018, I think. So I went to a talk, and here I was with my Longborn Letters under my arm, going over to Bath Festival and going to the Paula Byrne talk where she was talking about the theatre. She had a book about Jane Austen theatre published at the time, but she was also talking about all the juvenilia and how she had lectured in it. And I was like, what? Like thinking I was the most Austen of all the Austens in the audience. I was like, what's this about juvenilia? Now I'd heard the word bandied about a bit, but really my knowledge of Austen was the 6 completed novels and the adaptations I'd seen on screen. And I was like, what's this now? These 2 unfinished novels. She was going on about Sanditon and the Watsons. I was like, here, this couldn't be true. The world mustn't know this. Like, 2 unfinished novels. What's this about? But anyway, before I was really struggling with what I was trying to write at the time, which, as I say in the introduction, as I was heading over, and I was so burnt out from that festival I was organising, but also in trying to knock out another book and having it about a minor character, Captain McCartan, and the horse I realized was going to need dialogue. There was no other way I could get this story written. I was like, I'm losing my marbles. I'm going to go off to Bath and just relax because this is outrageous. Like, and so that was it. I went over going, I actually laughed out loud in the aircraft going, the horse needs dialogue. This is the only way. And the Jane Austen world isn't ready for a talking horse. This is not going to happen. This is not Mr. Ed. I said, I'll go over now and relax. And actually on the way back, on the flight on the way back, I said, you know what? How hard can it be? I was so desperate, probably what I was writing. I said, look, will I give it a go? I'll read those 2 fragments and I'll decide, I'll try and finish one of them. And sure, hasn't she started it? Sure, will I just keep going and slap on an end? Maybe I'll be able to pull it off. And I was confident about my style and my writing a little bit. I had kind of polished it up a bit with the Longborn Letters. I could speak very easily in that way. It's actually, you know, it's funny, you know, someone at a festival once asked me, but like, it's the hardest thing. Do you like, you know, in my inner dialogue, I think is, you know, Regency talk. I think I just talk in here, like as they would have spoken at the time. You know, it just came so naturally to me to throw it down on the paper. Or maybe I just read Austen so much, it just was coming out easily anyway. So that's what I said I would do. And funnily enough, and in defense of my talking horse, who might make an appearance someday somewhere else, I was delighted to discover that Mark Twain wrote a novel about a talking horse. So I said, here, I wasn't as cracked as I thought it was, but I was glad it was cracked enough that I gave it up for then and shelved it, because I had spent nearly a week and I don't know how many thousand words of just, oh man, it really was wrecking my head. So actually, that's what I did. And I'm glad I picked the Watsons. And maybe there had been rumour at the time about Andrew Davies and Sanditon. Certainly when I was a draft or 2 in, I'd heard the rumours that he was making a screenplay for Sanditon. I was glad then that I picked the other one, because I just didn't want to be competing with it. And then if I sat down and watched it, how would I feel about my own and all that sort of thing. So that's what happened there, Emily. I was delighted I went with the Watsons, and I'm very, very attached to it, very fond of it. We have very similar, you know, I'll just keep talking. This might answer a few questions anyway, but we have very similar themes in the Watsons that we have in her other. So we have the similar characterization. We have the, you know, the poverty and the women being vulnerable because of financial things. We have rejection. We have a sickly parent. We have ridiculous characters. We have the clergy. We have, you know, the expectations of family. We have regret. We have redemption. So we have everything really. And it was all slapped down in the first few, like she only wrote 17,000 plus words. But she, you know, she kind of projectile vomited the characters out onto the page in those first few chapters. So she very much had set up an awful lot of information. In fact, I was kind of given advice to edit it a bit more, because she actually, it was info dumping is what the editor or the person I was working with had said. You're going to have to tidy it up, because even what's her name, Virginia Woolf had said about the Watsons. She had said that it was scantily done, and it was, you know, that Austen obviously is someone who comes back over and over again and is very particular about editing. So the fact she hadn't done that meant it was quite skeletal when I came across it, but a lot of information. So it was about being true to what she already had, but helping to put flesh on the bones, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. And it's, if you guys haven't read the Watsons yet, I highly recommend it. It reads very Austenian, like you're fleshing out of the characters, even like, I'm not giving anything away because we all know there's proposals in Austen novels. Yeah. Even the proposal scenes are written in the same style. Obviously they're done very different, but the fact that it's not always fleshed out with dialogue the way that Jane Austen, you know, she gives a little bit and then she tells the reader a little bit more about what's going on rather than actually having that really romantic, you know, type of expression. And it's very wonderfully done, Rose, absolutely wonderfully done. I just reread it this week again and I was like, I love it. So you did a fantastic job with it. So why do you think Jane Austen set aside the Watsons and didn't return to it?
Yeah, there's plenty written about that, and I think we're all kind of on the same wavelength. There's a few things. First of all, Jane Austen did her writing and her best writing and her editing and seemed happiest in her life, from what we can read, when she lived at both Steventon and in Chawton. So it was the idea of security and stability and a happy family life, usually in the country. Whereas when she went to Bath, it was a big shock to her system. There was expectation, I suppose, of meeting people and being thrown amongst the marriage market and whatnot, but she wasn't awfully happy there. She actually seemed to be quite unhappy from what they gather from her letters in that it wasn't her cup of tea at all. And I suppose a little bit of that is reflected in her observation about Anne Elliot's feelings towards Bath, perhaps. But at the same time, it's like she wrote a story, and this is what people feel. What was written in the Watsons was very close to her own family tale, and what she hinted to her sister Cassandra, who mentioned it to the nieces, who mentioned it to their cousin Edward Austen Lee, which ended up nearly 70 years later in his memoirs, that she had hinted about where she was going to go with it and that, but it was so close to their own family situation, and it was life imitating art. Her father did pass away. The girls were all totally vulnerable and their standard of living kept sinking. They ended up living in parts of Bath that they swore they'd never live in. It was very dodgy parts of the city. They just had to keep moving from place to place. They were totally dependent on the brothers. This is exactly what was happening in the Watsons, or so we believed. The idea that, and then even when they left Bath, it was to Southampton, to their brother who was at sea, whose wife was pregnant and children. And then her sister-in-law, Elizabeth, passed away, and their boys, Edward Knight's boys, were sent up to them, Southampton, to look after them. And it was just a lot of instability. And when they eventually got the cottage in Chawton, she settled down and started writing again and taking out stuff she had put aside and editing loads of them and got them successfully finished, and she was very happy with them and reading them to her nieces and to Cassandra and to Martha Lloyd and everything like that. So I just think I've had it in my life where I haven't written very much or very well when there's upheaval, and I've had upheaval in my personal life in the last 6 months, but I've also had upheaval with the pandemic. And some people, the opposite, they have been knocking out books. I know one or two people who've been brilliant, who are, oh, thank God, and they've been very productive. But for me, I think, like I said earlier, I'm a bit of a heady person. I need to kind of go back out to my walks, get myself back to my kind of meditation and my space, and create that space for myself, and not having to defend it to anyone. I only a few months ago, well, 12 months ago maybe, created a little corner in my little cottage, because up until then, I was just writing on my lap. I'd have to wait till I was in a coffee shop. I just was letting everyone else take up the space, and I wasn't creating. So I have this tiny little desk that a nun friend of mine, sister, gave me, that I repainted, and I put little things beside it. I put an old painting that I had when I was in university 25, 30 years ago. A crazy house we lived in, Cork City, but it was the best of memories, great times. So I just made this little corner for myself that's looking out at a beautiful view, that even if the weather isn't great, I'm looking out at nature, and I find that my creative space now. So I'm disciplined. When I sit there, I feel like a writer, and, so yeah. That's a long answer.
That's okay. It's a wonderful answer. So how daunting was it to try to complete a Jane Austen novel? Because of course, especially you're talking to a bunch of Janeites here, what type of challenges went into that?
Yeah, well, everything. Now, I wouldn't have gone near it if I hadn't done the Longborn Letters first. So sometimes it's like Hansel and Gretel and the the breadcrumbs. You're better off sometimes not looking too far ahead in life. And the Longborn Letters did better. I can hear my cat actually meowing outside the door. But anyway, I don't have to rescue him, but he's whinging and moaning. He knows it's almost dinner time here in Ireland, and what he's going to have. So anyway, so you're better off sometimes in life not looking too far ahead. Like, I would have been daunted and intimidated a bit if I'd known the Longborn Letters was going to be read by anyone outside of my family. I remember publishing 50 books, and a friend of mine went, 50 books? 50 books was the first. That was the original, what I was supposed to publish. Like, how are you going to get rid of 50 books? Like, you have to be handing it out in the street. And I was like, oh my God, people have no faith in me at all. Like, but anyway, luckily I did end up publishing more than that. So I think I published a couple of hundred initially for just to cover the book launches and stuff like that. And they went like hotcakes. And it was amazing. And I got good reviews in the national papers and in the magazines, and just with writers who were respected and people giving a debut author a handout, just being kind. It's like what I say, sometimes like local established authors wanted me to talk to other authors and stuff like that. So that was wonderful. But if I had not done the Longborn Letters, I would not have attempted the Watsons. If I had not considered writing a book about a talking horse, I would not have attempted the Watsons. It was really a case of, will I do the Watsons, which is less crazy here now. And I think as well, just keeping people's opinions away from myself was the best thing I did when I was writing the Watsons, because when I had it finished, I kind of mentioned it to a few people and they were so shocked. Like they fainted, they were perspiring and their eyebrows disappeared under their hairline because they were like so shocked. Like they expected me to say something, maybe Jane Austen, but certainly not, how dare you kind of approach her writing. It's almost unapproachable, to be honest with you. And I think that's why, number one, I had nothing to lose, because when you're not really, I'm no Jeffrey Archer. I wasn't, I hadn't a whole reputation staked on this. It was, I could do it and whatever. But I have to say, like, I didn't let many people read it at the beginning. And, I put a lot more work into it than the Longborn Letters. It kind of was a bit more heartbreaking to get the structure right and to, I got responses like, oh, this particular passage is awkward. And I didn't know what did they mean. The language was awkward, the characters, the interaction was awkward. What was awkward? I just, I'm new to writing. I actually hadn't a master's in creative writing under my belt. I wasn't sure. So it took me longer time to get it right. But I kind of went with my feeling, because I'm one of you guys. And I knew if I'm happy with it, maybe the reader will be happy with it. And maybe the people who bought the Longborn Letters would like to give it a go as well. But yeah, so it was, but I know that sending it out to, for review, let's say at the Jane Austen Regency World magazine, when that, I always send it there first. And when I got a good review there, I knew I was okay. Like if she found parts of it laugh out loud hilarious, then, I'm doing okay here. So, so that was that. It was daunting. I was told I was a bit mad, but there you go. And I'm happy how it turned out.
So this brings up another question. Of course, we've got a really large Jane Austen fan base worldwide. How have they received you and your books? Have they been open arms, supportive?
Yeah. Look, I've made great friends if no other reason. This has been an adventure. My husband has gone into historical costuming because of my love of Jane Austen, because I came back from Bath and mentioned the promenade and the walk and all that. And he started making a military uniform, and now he's made this Spencer for me and various other things. And he's buying swords currently online at auctions and stuff. He's lost the run of himself. It's been a great adventure. And I would never, if I had not written the Longborn Letters, I would not have visited Bath twice. I've been over to Chawton and Alton. I've made so many friends around the world. I'm going to wave at Lynn Henry. She's there, and she's one of my more mature, is how I'll put it, fans. And I just love communicating with her and with everyone. And now I like sending out the newsletter and all that. But, I've made great friends. And I have to shout out to Mark Brown, who's written books as well, and he's fantastic. He's a Cake and Courtship, and he's done obviously the Charlotte Collins mysteries as well. And mad about Mark, and I've just made some great friends, and just why not all you guys, just fantastic. It's been such an adventure. So they have been very supportive, but also they've really liked the books, and it's really them I'm writing it for. Now I am very aware that when it comes to the Jane Austen world, there is all sorts of variety. And I love Bride and Prejudice, and I love an old bit of zombie and whatever, but that's not how I write. I might someday, the talking horse might come into it, but, we could end up on Mars or something, Pemberley on Mars or something. But anyway, but for now, I'm writing the way I write, and, I don't expect everyone to like it. But it does definitely reach people, I think they know. I think all you need to do is read a snippet and you'll know whether it's your cup of tea or not. Yeah, thanks. Good question.
And now I don't know if everyone knows, I did throw it out there early, but the Watsons has progressed to the quarterfinals of the Screencraft Cinematic Book Awards. So congratulations, by the way, Rose, on that. Can you tell us a bit about this contest and how we can help support it?
I have no idea. Do you know, I think they've already, to be honest with you, I just looked it up. I'd forgotten I'd entered it. Sometimes, and I think this is because I don't know if everyone knows this, I self-published. So for me, it's been an amazing adventure, and I've been very, I won't say successful at it, but I have been kind of like, as in I've known my fan base, probably that helps an awful lot, and I've reached out to people, and I've made great connections, and it's just been an absolute gorgeous adventure. And it also meant little things like I've had more creative input to the covers than maybe some people might have got when they go other ways. Now, that was important to me, but I had a professional cover designer, but I was very much able to give him images and tell him what I wanted. Like the cover of the Watsons, like that is, I don't know, I have it here, sure. I'm not sure if people can see it. So that's a famous painting from the 1700s, and it's a French artist, but it's actually a study. So he went on and completed that painting. So that's the study, but it was the idea that women don't have a voice in the time of Jane Austen in particular. They were only partially visible, and they did not always have decisions they didn't always have choice around decisions that affected their own lives. They were a half-formed thing. They weren't totally liberated unless you were financially like Lady Catherine de Bourgh. You actually didn't have much choice, and you were very much mixing in a certain circle, and there was expectations. And if you were unmarried, you became a burden sometimes to your family because there often wasn't money set aside for you or whatever. So I felt that was important that I get that across, and that I just didn't have a picture, which was another, like I had loads of beautiful pictures, these girls looking out a window, waiting for a man on a carriage to arrive and all this sort of thing. I just felt that for me was more meaningful. So I was able to have a bit of input on that. I can't even recall what the question was. Oh, the award thing. I have to say, I did do an article for a period drama online magazine, and it was about why I felt the Watsons would make a great adaptation. And I suppose I feel that the same Jane Austen novels have been, I think we have 2 Persuasions again this year coming out, and definitely the one with Dakota Johnson. I think another alternative one I could be wrong now, but there's several of every version of everything. I actually looked it up. There was something like 150 or 160 variations of Pride and Prejudice. All different forms of screen adaptations, all different forms of whatever. So now that Sanditon was coming to the screen, I suppose I felt, well, the Watsons is the only one that hasn't made it to screen. And if anyone is like me and thinks they know Austen and only discovered when I was sitting at that lecture that actually there was unfinished work, I feel it, especially the Watsons, Sanditon I feel very differently about because it reads very differently, but the Watsons is very, very much, as I said, in keeping with Jane Austen's style, her humor, the character she creates, as I said, the same themes, similar struggles, challenges for women. It's just it's not similar, it's not a copy, because sometimes people say to me, oh, did you not think the Watsons was just maybe an early copy of Emma or something? I see no similarity whatsoever. I think they're all very different novels. You could say that about any of them. You could say Mrs. Bennet is a bit of a hypochondriac, Mr. Woodhouse is a bit of a hypochondriac. There's similarities everywhere. You get like the patronesses, and you get this and you get that. Like Lady Osborne is independent, but because her husband passed away and her son is going to inherit. But they're not all. More of the women are trying to make a go of it in life. And I just felt that was, I think it deserves to be on the screen. I hope it will someday be on the screen. I hope it'll be my version of it that gets onto the screen. Now, with regards to that, I picked I think they're going on to the semi-finalists now, and I didn't get notification that I was on that list yet. So we'll see, but yeah. It's on the Screencraft website. I probably will share it on my website so that, people can go in and have a look. But I don't know whether it'll go any further. But the fact it even went that far, I was really thrilled. I really was delighted, It's hard to compete, I think, in competition sometimes when it's open genre. You're up against, oh, they put it, kind of all these kind of end of the world scenarios and crimes and action dramas and all sorts of things. So it's hard to know. But anyway, we'll see.
Now, if it wins, does that mean it gets made into an adaptation?
I don't know. I think it'll just more. I think it gets circulated amongst like production companies and that sort of thing. Yeah.
I wish I was made of money and could just produce it, but I can't. So,
there was interest, to be honest, there was interest in it. The makers of, no, it hasn't emerged, it hasn't come into anything, but after the Longborn Letters, the production company that created the Tudors and Braveheart and what's the other one? Tudors, Vikings, all that sort of thing. They are based in Ireland, in the southwest, in the southeast. Ardmore Studios, and they do a lot of all that sort of thing. And they did meet with me, well, one particular member that met with me in Dublin and said she loved the Longborn Letter. Someone had sent it on to her, and she was just asking what I was working on. And so I said, oh, the Watsons, and I explained what it was about. And she said, oh, send me a copy then. So I did send her a copy, and she sent it off to someone who reads for them, who works for the BBC. So unless it'll get picked up at some time, then the pandemic hit. So, you know, she kind of just like, I think they weren't able to progress. I think they're just kind of finding their feet again. But who knows, if they were interested, maybe someone else would be interested, you know. I just think they're not aware it's out there, so maybe it'll get around.
Well, it certainly has a cast. Sorry.
No, I'm just going to say, Emily, that, you know, it really is something that, you know, the Joe Wrights, the Emily Thompsons, the people like that, you know, if it just landed in their lap, it would be great. But I don't got the power to do that. So.
Well, it certainly has a great lineup of strong female characters, from Emma Watson herself to Lady Osborne to Miss Edwards. It's really would be fantastic.
Good crack as well. She's very witty.
Yeah. So somebody was asking in the comments, if you could turn the Watsons into a movie, what would your perfect casting be? Would you be able to pick some actors that you would like to see play any of the characters in the Watsons?
I absolutely cannot. And I'll tell you why, because I'm a dinosaur now. And like when I was even asked this question a few years ago, the actors I had in mind are nearly hitting retirement now. You know, I mean, when you write something, it's often years before. So I was thinking of, oh, you know, Cillian Murphy would make a nice such and such. You know, Cillian Murphy's in Peaky Blinders, and you know, I like him, and I thought he would make a good, maybe Mr. Howard. And I had a few other characters in my mind, the Richard Armitages and all the, you know, the whatever, and they're all, bless them, they're turning into granddads on telly. Like, no offense now, they're just my own age or a little bit older, but it's just like these characters are 18 and in their 20s. And when I'm seeing things like people casting for Bridgerton or Sanditon or any of these are wonderful young actors. I just don't know them. I'm just really watching old television and, you know, reruns of stuff. I'm just a dinosaur. Midsummer Murders, and I watch the Antiques Roadshow, and I watch all these things. And I'm not really watching young, probably programs that young actors are in. Not really, anyway. Very few movies. I watched a movie last night called Knives Out. My husband wanted to watch. It was very good. Don Johnson was in it, and who else was in it? God, there was a few famous actors in it anyway, but it was very good, yeah.
Well, we can always imagine Richard Armitage in his North and South years as, you know, your character, and that's okay.
Someone just said Daniel Craig. Oh yeah, he was in it. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah.
Very nice to look at. All right. So you did mention earlier, oh, wait, hold on. Wait, I think there was another question in there. Hold on one second. Let me pop up. Did I see another question? Oh, we're getting to that one. That was about Sanditon. We'll get there. All right. So you also kind of mentioned a little bit ago that you have experience. You organized, I think you said 2017, it was the Bicentenary Jane Austen Festival in Limerick. Can you just tell us a little bit about what you did and how that went and your experience?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have I'm interested in events, but I'm also like qualified. It's one of many hats that I have. And you know, I realized, you know, yeah, Limerick has some connections here. So Jane Austen's Tom Lefroy, he was born and whatever came, and then there was the Georgian Quarter, and then there was the Georgian Society and the architecture. But also then there was things like, we have a brilliant historical costumer, Melissa Shields, and I've done several events with her now. And she did, let's say we have a thing in Ireland called Culture Night. Then I invited Whit Stillman over to do a screening of Love and Friendship. So that went well, and we had a great person down from Dublin to interview him, so an expert as well, and just a great guy and very great humour in that. There was a lady over doing Promise and Promiscuity. She was doing it in the UK, and she said she'd come over and do it here as part of the festival as well. And that was a great one-woman show of real great comedy, Promise and Promiscuity. Penny Ashton is the name of the lady, and that, you know, she travelled around Ireland. That was part of it as well. So we'd lots of, we'd theatre, we'd screen. Oh, Emer Nicole Downing is from Limerick as well. So Emer is an award-winning costume designer. So she was the costume designer on Becoming Jane, and on several, actually she did the work on the Tudors and Vikings and all that sort of thing, but on several period dramas, so Little Women and things like that. And she worked with Emma Thompson as well. And which one did she do with Emma Thompson? Can't recall now, but she's done lots of period dramas, and so she's an award-winning fashion designer, Hollywood fashion designer. And so I invited her back to Limerick to speak at the College of Fashion there, and also we gave a kind of an evening, a conversation with, and did an event there at one of our Georgian premises. And, you know, so it was really a mixture of fashion, food, tea. We did lots of afternoon tea events. We had Tim Bullimore from Jane Austen Regency World magazine came over and gave a talk, and just had lots of experts giving historical talks. And, you know, it was just amazing. It was amazing. But I had no budget, I had no committee, and I was doing it all kind of just on the goodness of people's hearts, of like whatever gotten tickets with to pay the artists and that sort of thing. So it just went really well. And I launched my book, I think, in the middle of it, or somewhere in there. The Longborn Letters came out as well. So that was it, really. And it was great. It's great. But I'm glad of another 100 years before it because, yeah, it was a lot of work. A lot of work.
That's wonderful. All right. So everybody has been chomping at the bit in the chat, and I've been waiting. Can you share any hints or insights of your next writing project?
Yeah. Well, you might be all surprised to know, well, one particular one has absolutely nothing to do with Jane Austen. Mm-hmm. Okay. Just see there. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you so much, Patty. Patty has to go. Patty Nelson. So anyway, yeah, so two things. I started kind of, as I say, I've been very choppy over the whole pandemic thing and my work situation. I was out in the front line, and to be honest with you, I got COVID myself and I was out of action for a while, and I got it before vaccination, so I was really laid up, was really well for a while, and there was just other things, and as I say, other things happened in our family life and COVID and frontline and all that. But the good news is then I went job sharing, so I decided, and the pandemic I think made a lot of us look at our lives and see what can we change here, is there anything good that can come out of it. And for me it was like, you know, I don't want to be working 5 days in a job that's stressing me out an awful lot. And, you know, if I free up a few days, I spend more time with my kids, I can pull back into childcare, and, you know, I can write a bit more. So that's basically what's happened. And in the middle of it all, an idea for another book came up, historical fiction again. So I parked Sanditon because I have an outline for it for quite a while, and I've put in quite a bit of effort into where I see it going. But the other one was a little bit more urgent, and no talking horses. It was actually, it's a book about an Irish servant girl. It's the relationship between two women, basically two girls, 16 years of age or thereabouts, 16, 17. And in Ireland, you know, we have a checkered past, and as all countries do, I believe. But in the 1930s, 1940s, pre-war, but post, let's say, Civil War here, post-war of independence, the Anglo-Irish ascendancy, the W.B. Yeatses and the Lady Gregorys and all those of this world, you know, the big house, as we call it, the Elizabeth Bowen, Molly Keane, all these had come from a very prosperous time in Ireland, pre the famine, particularly pre the Tenants League. I'm not going into any of the historical side of that. It's not about that. But what we see, and when we come in, is in the 30s, probably 1936, is that the idea of still working in the big house is a big deal, kind of when you're you know, fairly poor. And I'm looking back at my own grandparents and great-grandparents who would have to go to work milking someone else's cows up at the big house, you know, the big farmer, the big house, whatever. So the big houses where they had a lot of the, you know, it was still seen as kind of good to be a servant, let's say, in the big house and that. It's a bit kind of, I suppose, Downton Abbey-ish in a way. But at that time, things were going very downhill. Like their days were numbered and the money was running out, and they were often selling their land and that because there was big taxes, and, you know, the kind of lifestyle that they had before in the past was running out fairly fast. And so we see them kind of struggling, the Anglo-Irish family in the big house. But this girl is Ida. She's a local Catholic girl, 16, 17 years of age, hard of hearing. I actually put that in because I'm hard of hearing myself. I wear hearing aids, and I just felt people with disabilities or with limitations aren't represented much. It's not a big theme in the book, but I kind of felt it's no harm having it there either, because it's part of who she is. And she works up at the big house, and she has a complex relationship with Alice, who is the daughter of the big house. So we very much come to it with Alice having had a good education in England in a boarding school up to now. But again, because of the financial challenge, she's going to have to be educated at home now if they can't afford the fees and various different things. But a really deep relationship comes between them. And obviously Alice is Protestant, and that was a big deal back in Ireland then. So Alice and Ida's friendship is very disapproved upon, and the parish priest takes issue with it, and her father is very, Ida's father is very abusive, I suppose, is what you'd say. What we'd call now, it's a domestic abusive situation, like where he's quite abusive to his family. And it's very much about what happens and how they navigate that. And they have a lot of challenges. Now, I actually just the other day chopped half of it. I lost 32,000 words intentionally. I felt that, I was sending her to America and I was doing a different thing and I was bringing her back. I decided it ain't going to happen. It just felt more authentic, that she has to kind of really hit rock bottom a bit more. And, I'll resolve it then as it comes through, so that's where that book is at the moment. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Do you have a working title for that one yet?
I'm just calling it Ida, which is an Irish name that I like. And there was a Saint Ida. It was a place I worked in West Limerick at one point. There's a little village there, and they have a holy well. And there was a convent set up there back in, a couple of hundred, like 400 or 500 AD. And it was like Saint Ida that did it. And a lot of the girls locally there are called Ida. And Ida's a nice name. Ida is a variation of it. So, we'd hear that name sometimes in English, Saint Ita or Ita. And there is quite a religious thing, because it was a very oppressive time in Ireland with the Catholic Church and the control and the decisions made about women in particular. And, you probably heard about the mother and baby homes and all these things. So it was a very oppressive time in Ireland. And even though I won't be going into great detail into some of that, or most of it, it's there in the background, and where we are today is where we've come from, I suppose. So we're looking at all that through these two girls, and they go their separate ways, and life treats them a bit unusually. But I think I was trying too much to do a mammoth task of a bit of a saga when it wasn't really a saga. I needed to kind of keep it about the two of them. You could kind of end up going off into the woods with it, because the topics are so big. But I'm actually very happy with it. I like Ida very much. I'm very attached to her, and there's a lovely relationship between her and Alice. And yeah, it's a love affair. It is love. And it was never going to be anything but that. Like, it was never going to be a man in the house, in the big house, or a woman in the big house and a male servant. It was always going to be two women, because, God damn it, we've gone through enough. Like, I really feel I have to represent the women of my country and the challenges we had back then, and, that everyone has in their countries. Checkered fast, that you see. So that's where that's at. But just to say about Sanditon, I haven't totally abandoned it. I know I'd said the outline laid out and all that. Something has come to light of late, and I can't actually say because it's quite a secret, and it might not materialize, so I don't even want to jinx myself about it. But something has materialized, and it's kind of like it's given me another path to which to follow to finish Sanditon, and I'm going to look into it. That's all I'll say. But it would speed up things for me, and if it's in line with what I'm already planning, it certainly would be something I'm looking to do. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But I might give an update on that in a couple of weeks on the newsletter, maybe, or on the website. I mean, I'll kind of know more in about a month or 6 weeks. I have to do a bit of work first and a bit of research, and I'm enjoying the research. It's going great. So I love that, actually. People are just brilliant, all these volunteers and historians, but we'll see where that goes. But it's connected to Sanditon. It will be true to Sanditon would be as I would have finished, but at the same time, it has opened up something for me and might speed up the whole thing. It's like it's taken my focus now from Ida, and I'm back on Sanditon again. So we'll see. It'd be nice to put one of them to bed. So,
well, we're excited for both of them. So, so when you were working on the Watsons and are working on Sanditon, do you read other Jane Austen fanfic or watch adaptations like the Andrew Davies, or do you just completely ignore it so it doesn't direct where you go in your head?
Yeah, I stay well clear of it. And I actually think even for the Longborn Letters, and I had to take the letters out of it, I probably read it closely once and threw it away. Like, it's amazing how oh my God, I said this to someone, I'm so easily influenced that if I read Harry Potter or watched it in the middle of writing the Watsons, Mr. Howard would have come in on a broomstick. And I swear to God, honestly, I'm just so easily influenced. There could have been anything turning up in the middle. It actually happened a little bit with the Longborn Letters. I was reading books at the time, and I can't say what, because geez, that could be copyrighted out. But like, it's in, they influenced me so much, or I liked the character so much that a variation of that character ended up in my book. And that's the truth. So I have to be a bit careful what I read.
Right.
I'm doing research, so it's a bit of nonfiction now. Nonfiction for both Ida, because I'm looking at, let's say, the history of psychiatric health in Ireland and all sorts of things. And I'm looking at other people's, what other people have written, and the same with Jane Austen a bit at the moment too. But, you know, I have to be cautious.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And then we've hit on a couple things, but why don't you tell us about how people can follow you, your work, your website, your social media, your newsletter? How can they get access to all of what Rose is doing and up to?
Okay. Well, if you're on Twitter, it's probably the easiest thing. I'm definitely on Twitter most days, and, you know, I do. So it's just Rose Servitova. If you look up Rose Servitova on Twitter, there I am. Now, I do have a Facebook page, like myself personally, but I have a Facebook for Rose Servitova Writer, and that's kind of where the writing stuff goes. And the newsletter and website, again, roseservitova.com, simple as. And the website gets updated when I have something coming up. So like, I had nothing for a long time. I had quite a bit at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of online. I did talks with Chawton House and various different places. And obviously when the Watsons came out, that was all, I was so lucky I published it before the pandemic, because no one knew the way, and people were kind of saying, hold off till spring or April of next year. But I just kind of got told me, let it off in November. I was invited up to the Georgian Festival in Armagh. And I just said, look, I'll just do it at that festival, and in Dublin, and then Cork invited me. Of course, I had to have one in Limerick then, because then all my, you know, I was like nationwide. But the reality is that I was kind of glad I left it off when it was. So yeah, my website, roseservitova.com, at the end, it just says subscribe to newsletter, or I call it the monthly pamphlet. It just seems a bit more, the newsletter sounds very jazzy. I don't think Jane Austen would have done the newsletters. She might have done a pamphlet. And as I say, I invite a different Austen character to give us a few paragraphs, a small talk at the beginning, usually in character. I think I've done quite a few now at this stage. If anyone wants them, you know, let me know, I can resend them or something. But I'm just thinking now that this month it's going to be a very unusual character, a Mr. Dixon from Emma. Yes, who married Miss Campbell, because he's Irish, and we have St. Patrick's Day coming up. So I felt, you know, there was all that talk about him sending pianofortes to Jane Fairfax and wishing he had married her, and that, you know, Miss Campbell is very plain next to Jane Fairfax. And there's all this that's played upon. And, you know, he kind of gets into a bit of bother because of it, actually. The rumours don't do his marriage any favour. So I just write a few paragraphs on that. So it'll be coming from Ireland this month. From his estate in Ballycraig, I think is what it's called, in Ireland. Mr. Campbell's son-in-law, Mr. Dixon. Yeah.
Well, the newsletters are very entertaining. I enjoy getting them. I think Lady Catherine de Bourgh and Mrs. Elton's contributions were my favorite so far.
They're very bold. They're very bold. Yeah, they are. They're like so haughty. But anyway, I do enjoy them.
Yeah. I enjoy how you're able to pull out those minor character voices and speak as them. It's great.
Yeah, but that's because I believe Jane Austen, that's where she shone. Like, I mean, what writers can give someone literally a few words like Mr. Palmer, or, you know, or some of these characters are just there for literally, they run across even Mr. Collins, like he is really a fleeting individual in Pride and Prejudice, but what an impact, and how he wiggles his way into everyone's dinner table, you know, onto everyone's invite list, you know. So yeah, she did it, and I'm just imitating. So
that's wonderful. Well, is there anything else you would like to share with the group before we open it up to Q&A?
No, not really. I will put it back on. I am looking at you the whole time, Emily. So what I'm going to do is put it onto my gallery so that I can see all the lovely people. Hey, there you are. I think there's 2 pages, so I'll have a little sconce around. So thank you, guys.
Yeah, if anyone wants to turn on their video, unmute themselves, ask any questions, feel free to do so.
A tiny bit I will, but only if you ask, because I know we're probably running over time. Yeah, if you want me to, I will. No hassle. Just let me know.
Does anybody have any pressing questions, or do we want to hear Rose read to us?
Thank you for all your lovely backgrounds and stuff, guys, as well. Brilliant. Loads of comments here as well. Thanks, guys, for all your support. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So where do you get the book, and is it available as an ebook?
Yes, it is available. Well, let's say if you want the paperback, Amazon do it, and the book depository, I would say at the moment. Like, I have some copies, but I kind of keep them myself for when I'm going to events and that sort of thing. So I kind of, or sometimes I do competitions and I send off a signed copy or something like that. But other than that, it's Amazon, and you can get it on Kindle. Now, I'm not sure if it's available. I think it's available on other readers. I'm so sorry. Someone will have to check that out for me, because when I got the publisher to put it up, they said they put it in different formats for different e-readers. So I don't know if it's on those other ones, Kobo or whatever they're called, but certainly on Kindle. And I think on ebook. I don't know.
Well, I'd love to hear you read a passage.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, everybody in the chat and Sigmund are all saying, let's hear you read a passage. So
are you sure? Okay. Well, I do a small bit from the Longborn Letters. So, and what I'll do is only a small bit. So because it's near the end of the book, I don't want to give away anything, but just to say that the relations between, there's a lot of stuff has gone under the bridge at this stage of the book. They've been through ups and downs, both the Bennets and, let's say, the Collinses and stuff like that. So Mr. Collins, whenever he's arriving to Lucas Lodge and that, he lets him know he's going to annually, there's kind of the harvest fair, and if he's there around that time, you know, he gives a chat, you know, he'll say a few prayers, or, you know, give one of his speeches, which he thinks everyone wants to hear, when all they want to do is drink and dance and whatnot after the harvest. So these were all the workers and stuff. So I'll just read the first paragraph of this, and then, yeah. So this is Mr. Collins's letter to say he's going to be arriving. So it's the end of August. Dear Sir, it is with the utmost delight that I wish to inform you that the Collins family will be descending upon Lucas Lodge on September 23rd for a fortnight's stay, and hope to see you frequently during our visit. In particular, I believe I will be present for the harvest festivities, which you have planned for early October, for a little bird has whispered in my ear that it is the expected time of completion of harvest, and only to do justice to the memory of my late honourable father-in-law, sorry, just give away something there, I have prepared a number of passages from the good book which reference harvesting of crops and souls, and gratitude, which I feel will be appreciated by those gathered prior to celebrations getting underway. And then the rest of it is about something else. So this is his letter then when he returns home after the harvest fair. He sends another letter to Mr. Bennet. 15th of October, dear Mr. Bennet, now that we have returned home to Hunsford Parsonage, may I take this opportunity to formally express my regret once again for my conduct at your harvest festivities. Although I have sincerely apologised on every occasion that we met, I cannot help but blush at the remembrance of the particulars of that evening, and recall to mind the integrity of the late Sir William Lucas, and how I may have brought shame on his memory. As I have stated time and again, the wonderful response I received to my passages from the workers present made me quite giddy, and as I had only partook of one cognac prior to my speech to assist with any agitation of mind, nerves, or spirit, I'm still at a loss as to how I became quite so inebriated thereafter. That I sprained an ankle while dancing and refused to quit has led to a very severe swelling that I have even yet as a daily reminder and punishment for my foolishness. But that I returned home at dawn without my shirt is the point which both Charlotte and I find most difficult to overcome. It shames me to write this letter to you, cousin, but it is a shame that I will not attempt to avoid, for who but I should feel the full force of humiliation for behaving in such a heathen and disgraceful manner. Naturally, I have not disclosed this tale at Rosings, and though unfortunately many of the Netherfield staff were present, I would appreciate if you would keep it, if you would not mention it to Mr. and Mrs. Smock, unless they hear it elsewhere, and you are compelled to tell some small discretionary untruths to cover over the horrible facts. Pray apologise on my behalf again to Mrs. Hill, whose grandmother's trifle dish came to its demise by falling from my head. And I leave it at that. So, because the rest would give away something else. But that's a little taste of Mr. Collins kind of later on, losing the run of himself. Now, if you want, I'll read a little bit from the Watsons as well.
Yes, please.
Right?
Yes, let's.
So, in the Watsons, just for those who don't know, there is Emma Watson, who is our main protagonist, and then there's her sister Elizabeth. Now, when I was a kid, I used to watch the old black and white movies, and Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn were two people I loved in the movies. There was always this kind of verbal combat, and here, I'm sorry now, I'm burping. Sorry, that here was Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn, wearing trousers and stuff, when all these women of the same age were wearing these beautiful, shiny, shimmering dresses, and the man was, Clark Gable was grabbing them in his arms, or Jimmy Stewart, or whatever. And here was Katharine Hepburn, giving as good as she got, always. And with Spencer Tracy, and it was always a meeting of minds. They were equals. There was never a sense that he was the smart one and she was dumb or something like that. So I loved that, and I loved that banter. And when I thought of Mr. Shaw and Elizabeth Watson, they came to mind, and I actually had them on my visual kind of vision board, or whatever you call it when you're writing. I kind of had a visual of Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. So anyway, they hate each other, this part of the book. He's humiliated her big time at a ball that they were at, and she hates his guts. So they're actually at the Watson's house now at the moment, at the parsonage, and they are kind of in-laws, because Elizabeth's sister has married his uncle. So they're kind of all thrown together on this particular visit, and they're at the Watson's house. So they're all having tea and having chats and whatnot after dinner, and having their evening cup of tea and whatever. So he stood up, Mr. Shaw stood up and moved over to where Elizabeth was tidying away the tea items. Pouring and handing him the last remaining cup, Elizabeth said, "Tea, Mr. Shaw. There is nothing like tea for comforting the soul and making social creatures of us all. There is nothing like tea for loosening the tongue." A complaint, I sincerely believe, Miss Elizabeth, which has never afflicted you in your entire life. It greatly depends on the topic, sir. You, for example, speak much of marriage for one who makes every effort to avoid it. Yes, it's much like sickness, rain, and nuisance women in that regard. The more one tries to avoid them, the more one seems to attract. I must learn to speak less on the subject, and perhaps then I shall have some peace. No, sir, please do no such thing, for then you might speak on more endearing subjects and appear in a better light. It would greatly upset me to find you all ease and pleasantries, for I have put great effort into forming my current opinion of you, and it would upend all my work thus far. We would be a very dull party if each of us were full of niceties. You had best stay as you are. My word, Miss Watson, but you do enjoy giving me a taste of my own treatment of others. I shall endeavour not to disappoint you, and will begin at once. This is the most dreadful tea I've ever tasted. It is too cold, too strong, and too sweet. As was my intention, sir. Now, if you will excuse me. With that, Elizabeth handed Nanny, who had just entered the room, the tea things, and moved back over to her sisters by the fire, with Mr. Shaw following her movements all the while. Up to this point in his life, he had never met his equal for wit, openness, and sarcastic social commentary, and had ever looked down upon his company wherever he went, as being far inferior to himself in its ability to observe and entertain. But here was the beautiful Elizabeth Watson, fearless in her approach and dumbfounding in her astuteness, and though he had not admitted it to himself as yet, he was thoroughly captivated. Now, Nico, thank you. Thank you, guys.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Thank you very much. Well, I hope you guys are all, if you have not read them yet, excited to go out and purchase both the Watsons and Longborn Letters and sit down and just enjoy the wonderful read. It's fantastic. So any other questions from anybody before we send Rose off with our thanks?
No problem. And just, you can contact me anytime. You're very welcome, guys. Thank you very much. You can contact me anytime through the website. I think there's some writer, communicator, whatever. It's there anyway. And yeah, you can respond to the newsletter as well. That gets to me. If you just, you know, reply back, I can get that as well. So if you think of a question later and you want to ask me, do. And thank you all. There's a lot of familiar names here. So I see Kirk and Lynn and several others, and Anna, and a lot of them there, people I know from the Jane Austen world. Thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate it. I actually have something on at 7:30, so I have to go anyway because I have less than an hour to get ready. So, but thank you all.
Thank you so very much, Rose. We appreciate it.
Publicly mention something about the Sanditon development. I will. I'll put it down somewhere. I'll post it on my social media or whatever as soon as I can. Okay.
Fantastic.
Bye.
Bye, Rose. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. You're all the best. Love you all.
Wonderful lecture. Enjoyed it so much. Wonderful.
Thank you. Lovely.
You should be very proud of yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. I am proud of you guys too. It's great.
Well, thank you, Rose. Have a wonderful evening.
Yeah. I'll head off now. Bye.
Bye. And thank you, everyone, for joining in today. Hope you guys have a fantastic Sunday. And we may see you next time. Our next event is on March 27th at 2:30 Arizona time. We are going to be discussing A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. So hope to see you all there. We'll send out emails soon and it'll go up on the Jasna website and all that other stuff. So check it out and join us on March 27th, 2:30, where our very own Dr. Holly Welker will be going ahead and facilitating our discussion.